Welcome to Muslims Doing Things, a podcast about extraordinary Muslims and their career journeys. Today we have Anoosha Syed. Anoosha, what do you do?
Hi, I am a children's book author and illustrator, as well as a character designer for animation.
So I'm really excited to get into this because I've noticed we grew up. I'm sure this is going to be a part of your story. I've never spoken to you about your story, but we grew up at a time that we didn't really have many options in our space.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have a lot of friends who are starting to think, okay, I'm going to write my own children's books. And they've started to do that. So it's interesting to kind of see that within our generation, there's a wave of usually women, though I do know of a few men who've kind of taken this role on to educate. But let's have you talk about that instead of me. So let's go way back, Anisha. Where were you born?
I was originally born in Karachi, Pakistan, although we were living in Saudi Arabia at the time. I moved around a lot when I was growing up, but yeah, I'm originally Pakistani.
Okay, great. And when you grew up, were you artistic? Like, how did you kind of enter the arts?
I would say I was about as artistic as any kid is. There wasn't really like I would like color in my own time. I was very imaginative, but like my true draw was towards reading. I was a huge reader as a kid,
Hmm.
and I always wanted to be a writer, and it wasn't until I got to high school that I learned about, oh, you could be an artist as a career, and that's when I started to get more into it. But as a kid, I don't think I was particularly artistic, I would say.
And when you were in high school, where was that? Was that in the States or was that back in Saudi or Karachi?
Then eventually by that time we were in Pakistan.
And so when you were reading and writing, typically a lot of people on this podcast grew up in America, and a big part of their story is like we weren't represented. So that's kind of what drove me. I can't imagine that's your story in Pakistan. So kind of, as you started to embark on this journey, what was it that drove you to that space, and what were you hoping to do with it? And I know Karachi specifically is
Um,
pretty. There's a lot of art in Karachi.
Yeah, I was like living in Lahore at the time, but the thing was that I still felt like I didn't entirely fit in because although I was living in Pakistan at the time, it was before then I was mostly in Dubai. I went to international schools and I was very much a whitewashed kid and I was completely separated from my culture. So when eventually my dad was like, "Let's go to Pakistan, you got to like, you know, get back into it again." I felt very much not fitting in with people, um, which ended up like leading to my love for like now as an adult, like trying to get back into my culture and embracing it and everything. Um, but what really drew me to writing and art was more just as the escapism, I guess. Being able to like explore different worlds, and I was really into like fantasy and sci-fi and things like that, and just again because I wasn't really fitting in, like having that other place to escape to was something that I was really drawn towards, and I think that was what drew me into fiction in the first place.
And when you realized you liked it, what were your next steps? Did you go to school for it? Did you just start writing books? Like, how did that journey evolve to where you are today?
So I kind of fell into children's books kind of accidentally years later. Initially, I wanted to go into school for animation. This was a little bit difficult because I am the first artist in my family, and of course, my parents were not really keen on the idea of me going into the arts. And it wasn't that they were entirely against it, but I think they were coming from a place of love, of like, they didn't want me to be a starving artist. They didn't want me to not be able to like take care of myself. So initially, when I wanted to go to school for arts, they were like, like, why don't you go do something a little bit more business oriented. So I ended up initially going to school for visual communication, which is about as far away from art you can go while still kind of dipping your toes in it. It's very much like graphic design for businesses and things like that. Did that for a semester. I threw a tantrum and dropped out because I hated it so much. And then I ended up going to school for illustration in Switzerland, where my family was living at the time. There, yeah, I still wanted to do animation. Illustration was the only art course that they had available, so that's what I ended up doing, and that's where I started falling in love with the world of illustration. After I graduated, I started working in animation, did that for a while, and then I kind of realized that books were where my heart lied, and yeah, I've just been illustrating books ever since, and only recently have I started writing my own stories as well.
And when you finished this schooling and you're practicing and you decided you wanted to illustrate books, I've seen I've seen people pursue illustration in different ways. Well, first of all, maybe we can understand how children's
Hmm.
books work a little bit.
Sure.
Typically, there's an author and an illustrator, right? And I'd assume
Yes.
like the illustrator has its own world, just the way the authors do. And illustrators, you kind of
Hmm.
know the who's who of illustrators. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And so, as you're doing this, and you decide you want to take this path, did you know you wanted to illustrate for children's books specifically? And how did you then like do that?
So I was leaning more towards just like general illustration work. So doing any kind of work, for like branding, packaging design, and things like that. I started getting a lot of children's book offers from major publishers, and I was like, okay, great. That's just like work. I'll take anything. But it's mostly the style that I had. It's very much like children oriented. It's very juvenile. It's very, yeah, it's just like kid appropriate, which is why it seemed to attract a lot of publishers for that. So if anyone is interested in getting into children's books, definitely make sure your portfolio is catered towards that kind of stuff. And yeah, just because I was getting a lot of those offers, I became more and more interested in it and realized that, okay, if this is something that I'm good at, I might as well just go straight deep into it. And yeah, I just started to love it more and more. And that's how I am now mostly a children's book illustrator.
Did you know your style? Like when you put your portfolio up, so I've had a portfolio for architecture.
Hmm.
I probably could put a product design portfolio together if I wanted to now. And like when I'm curating a portfolio, or when I did in the past, I haven't done it in a long time. I'm really specific in my head about who they want to see on the other side, right? Like how do they want to perceive me? Is it more in your interest in your portfolio to show like, okay, this is my aesthetic and I'm stuck to it? Or when you're illustrating it, does it make more sense to have a portfolio that shows, look, I have a breadth of themes?
Um, I think that definitely it can be helpful to have like a breadth of thing, like having a variety depending on like what area you want to go into. So as much as I love picture books, I love doing all different types of illustrations. So within my portfolio, you can find like, branding stuff, you can find packaging stuff. It's like a whole wide array of things. But I would say that someone who is starting out, it can be a little bit of a deterrent and could end up like working against you if you have like way too many different styles in your portfolio and too many different areas. Just because like you're not putting enough focus on any of these things, and that might make it harder for you to find work, if that makes sense. Where like you're not
Yeah.
focusing on anything and not giving it enough attention. So, it's best to like fixate on like one specific industry and focus your portfolio towards that. And then like later on branch out. Yeah, I think that would be my advice.
And when you're like these people are reaching out to you, how do the economics work? Do you like say yes and they kind of give you, and not for you specifically, but let's just talk
Hmm.
about the industry generally.
Sure,
What are
sure.
the ways in which people get paid? Is it like here's a lump sum payment, or you get royalties on the book, or you go and look for an agent? How do you turn this craft and this skill into like, your income?
Oh yeah. Okay. So one thing to understand is that there are two different types ways you can get into publishing. One is self-publishing, which is where you handle everything. You write, hire like an illustrator, and then do the editing, get it printed, get it published, do the marketing, everything yourself. I don't do self-publishing. It is a totally valid way of doing things, but I don't. It's just way too much work and not enough like guarantee. The other way is traditional publishing, which is what I do, and that's the traditional sense where a publisher will get in touch with you, and I'm speaking as an illustrator first. And a publisher will have had a deal with an author already, and they will find the right illustrator for a job, because a lot of people don't understand that like if you as an author are trying to get a book published, you should not have an illustrator on board already. The publisher will choose one for you.
Huh.
So the yeah, it's a lot of people don't know that, and you'll actually be wasting your time if you have an illustrator on board for your manuscript, because you'll end up wasting time and money for that. But yeah, the publisher will get in contact with me. I do have an agent, and I highly recommend any author and illustrator to hire a literary agent. And they will contact my agent with an offer of like, this is the book, this is the manuscript, this is the author, and this is the offer that we have for you. my agent will negotiate that offer, try to make it as high as possible, as well as make sure the terms benefit me. And then in terms of payment, it will be in installments. So usually it would be 25% on signing the contract, 25% on submitting the sketches, 25% on submitting the final art, and 25% on printing the book, well, when the book is published. And then once the book is published and it starts, I get paid, that's the advance. And then once the book is published and it starts selling, then eventually I will get the royalties, but I only get paid royalties once the advance has been paid in full. So for example, if I am paid 30,000 for a picture book, then the book has to earn 30,000 in royalties first. That goes to
Huh.
the publisher to pay them back, and then I start seeing royalties.
Yeah. And again, not to you, but specifically, but generally is what is the range? Like what's a common range for somebody who's covered by an agent for and I don't know how it gets measured. Is it by pages, like a 20-page picture book, or how do they kind of determine what the range might be?
So it depends on the publisher. If you're working with like a smaller indie publisher, usually they do it per page. If you're working self-publishing, it's usually per page. When you're talking about traditional big five are like the top publishers in the U.S. Simon and Schuster, Macmillan, HarperCollins. I think I'm missing one more. They are going to be paying like per book, and that can be depending on like what kind of book it is, whether it's a board book, which are like those 12-page small chunky books for kids, versus like a picture book, which is like those 32 to 40-page books. It'll be like a lump sum. For that, it really does depend on experience level, how many books are being published, like what quantity, how high profile the book is. But generally, it will be 10,000 to 35,000 for one picture book, for like those top five publishers. For a smaller indie press, it might be more like 5,000 to 10,000. But I would normally say that like if you are working on a picture book project, it should be at minimum $15,000 for a book.
So the interesting thing about design is that when you design, you kind of have your own aesthetic, your own vibe, right? And you have to ultimately sell it on the person who's going to then be represented by your vibe. So when you are putting these picture books together and you've already cleared that you're going to work with the author, do you meet with the author in advance, like at a mood board, or do you like send them over 5 or 6 different directions, or do they look at your portfolio and say like that's the flavor I want? How do you align before going too deep in a direction to reflect the author's then brand?
Okay, so this is a really funny thing. Another misconception is that I have zero contact with the author throughout the entire process. I
Huh.
only work with the publisher, and specifically, usually the art director, sometimes with the editor. But yeah, the publisher likes to keep us separate. And the author does have some amount of input in the artwork, but for the most part, it is the publisher who kind of decides the vision. And it's more so because the publisher has a better understanding of what the market is like, what is best for the book. They have like a better eye on the artwork than the author might. So, what will usually happen, and this kind of depends project to project and also where you are at in like your illustrator experience level, where when you're first starting out, like the author or like the publisher might have like a specific vision in mind, and they will contact the illustrator and like they'll work with the illustrator more closely to bring that vision to life that the publisher has. I'm thankfully in the stage of my career where publishers will contact me specifically for my vision and my style.
Hmm.
And so what happens in the projects that I work on is, I'll be given the manuscript. I'll be given like a general idea of like, and sometimes I might not even be given an idea of like what should go on a page. It's pretty much just like whatever I want to do, and then I'll come up with my initial designs for everything. Send it over. The author will have a look through and kind of give a bit of input, but the publisher does filter out a lot of what the author says.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's a pretty interesting that like it's actually quite separated, but yeah, and it depends on the project. Sometimes I'll get a lot of notes. Sometimes it's like, Anoosha, great, whatever. We'll just keep going. It looks great.
And within your process, as you're going through that, and you look at a manuscript, what's your process actually like? Do you take pen to paper? Do you go online and start to draw digitally? Do you look for inspiration?
Yeah, so when I first start off the project, I'll begin with the kind of more the exploration stage where I'll make a Pinterest board and collect as many references and inspirations as I possibly can to kind of figure out the direction I want to go in. And then in my introduction, kind of like the art phase of it, I'll start off with the character designs of just figuring out what the characters in the book could look like and figuring out what the style can be. Because even within my own style, it can kind of range from like a bit more cartoony and stylized versus a bit more realistic.
Hmm.
And each of my books does have like its own slightly different style to suit the work. So that's the kind of stage where I'll figure all of that out. And then it'll get approved by the publisher as well as the author. We'll kind of figure out like which direction we want to go in. Then with the manuscript, I'll kind of go through all of and sketch out all of the pages with my initial rough concepts for each page, get that approved with any notes, then clean that up a little bit, and then we go into the final artwork. So that's kind of like the general how each stage goes for every book.
And around like what's the timeline more or less?
Oh, that's a really tough question. So early in my career, the projects would be very, very quick, usually 3 months for a book. Now I get a full year.
Oh wow. And
Yes.
what's a good quantity of books? Like how many books are you working on at a given time?
That also has changed within my career. When I first started, I was usually working on maybe like 4 or 5 books at a time. But now I kind of do a maximum of 3 in a year.
Wow. So you really get the opportunity to kind of focus. And how do
Yeah.
you is most of the time taken by iterations? Like is it the case that you like work really hard for a month and you have 2 months that you're chilling, or is like you do like a month of character development and then a month of scene development? How do you spend a year on 30 pages?
Yeah. I'll spend like a month or two on just the development portion, and then maybe like 2 months on the sketches, 2 months on like 3 months on the finals. And you have to understand that there's like a lot of like dead space in between each stage where the
Mhm.
publisher is also like reviewing everything. So there's time spent on that where like it's which is taken out of the schedule. And then I'm also working on multiple projects at a time. So it's not like within the 3 month span of working on one stage of a book, I'm only working on that. I'm also working on other things as well. So you do have to juggle quite a few different tasks at a time. But yeah, it's not like I'm working on one thing only at any given time.
Well, you had a collaboration recently with Target.
Yes, I did. That was very, very
Was it
exciting.
was it your first type of collaboration like that?
At that scale, yes. I've never done anything like that before, and it was really great.
Well, let's talk about collabs. So you're talking about how now you're more picky with your books. You've kind of developed your
Mhm.
style. Um, who finds you collabs? B, what is like? Give me the parallel journey of collabs that's happened alongside your work as a publisher. So you realize you have this power to communicate visually, and you can do things with it. And this is what I love about creative careers. Like, yeah, you kind of figured out the publishing angle, but you're like, hold on, like I could do more.
Mhm.
What did that parallel journey look like while you're figuring out how to manage 30 pages of illustration and sell it to a huge publisher?
Oh, geez. Yeah, so as much as I love working on books, I I just got bored. Like I want to do like all of these different things. I want and especially like I love the idea of working with like merchandise and like having my art on things, especially things that you can find in stores. And as much as I love working on books, it's like mostly targeted towards children and I want to reach different age groups as well. So yeah, like I've been trying to like start focusing my portfolio towards like the more like surface illustration type of work. So like things on like merchandise, clothes, stationery, things like that. For that, I've been trying to for that there are a few stages to like I think to kind of reach that uh to try to get to a different industry is to first work on your portfolio to make sure you have those examples, so if like someone is interested they can see you can do the work. Then to reach out to people, so I did try to make a list of like different people who I would love to work with and finding out who I could contact to just send them an email being like, hey, if could I if you ever have something that could be a good fit, could you please think of me? And then also just trying to put it out into the world as much as possible. So, like on social media to my friends, I'll be like, hey, if you ever see an opportunity rise up, can you please like think of me, or can you please like let me know if there's something like that could come up? Because well, I think like one thing that I really forget, and I think a lot of people forget, is that if you have like a community of like friends of like-minded people in your industry, then you should reach out, like you reach out and like if you need the help, like ask for it. Like you shouldn't have to like be in it by yourself and to take advantage of those connections. And yeah, but like the Target thing just happened kind of out of the blue, where like sometimes you just exist on social media, or you're just putting your stuff out there, and you're lucky enough that someone sees it. And that's what happened with Target, where they had just seen my work online, and they reached out for that.
And what did that look like? They're like, "Hey, Anoosha, let's do a line," or "Hey, Anoosha, can we have a drawing?" Like, what did the involvement look like beginning to end? And how did you manage it on the business side? Is this something that you had somebody else manage, or were you like, "Okay, let me work my way through how this should look"?
So this Target collaboration was like one of the easiest projects I ever worked on, because like I know one thing like working with like big companies is like there is like a lot of it goes through a lot of people. They have like so many notes. They're very like finicky about details, which is like one thing that I've heard is very annoying working with them. But Target has just been like they're just like whatever you want to do, just do it. We'll be happy with anything you work on. They had no notes at any point. And yeah, they had basically said that like we're doing a line for like a holiday, like gift wrappings and things like that. You're going to be one of I think five different illustrators who are collaborating with us, and we're going to be making gift bags. We're making wrapping papers. We're making ornaments, and just do whatever like the holiday season means to you. And so for me personally, because I'm Muslim, I don't celebrate Christmas. I was trying to think of something that was like, okay, what is something that like I wanted to think of more on like the wintry side of things, and make like a collection that was more inclusive for that anyone could use. So yeah, so I was like kind of leaning into the wintry aspect and just coming up with as many ideas as I could that was pitching towards them. But like I said, they were just so easy to work with. They were like, yeah, anything you want to do, Anusha, just go for it. Um, yeah, it was just a super easy and really fun process. For the business side of things, I did say that I have an agent, but she only deals with books. She's specifically a literary agent. I know you can also hire a or like work with an illustration agent, but I was happy to do it by myself. My agent did kind of negotiate the project a little bit, but because they were working with like those four other artists as well, it was kind of like a fixed budget,
Right.
fixed contract. There wasn't much that we could like change. But I was really happy with the offer that they had, and yeah, it was a really great project to work on. I don't think I'll be ever be this lucky with a client ever again.
And what was it like walking into Target and seeing not
I
only I think about their
didn't.
face was up there too, not just the the work, right?
I haven't been. We don't have Target in Canada.
Oh my goodness. It's time to
I'm
drive to the closest part of
I
America.
know. I was really hoping to, because like the collection was on from like mid-November until like the end of December, and like I was really hoping to drive down to Buffalo to check it out, but we just never had enough time. We recently moved into a new house, so we were like really busy. So I asked my mom, she lives in Texas, to like take photos for me and
Oh,
everything. So I at least have that. And Target did send me my artist sample, so I do have those. But unfortunately, I was never able to check the stall in person, which was such a shame.
I'm sure it'll be the first. I'm sure it's not the first, but I'm sure it's one of many and will continue
I
to
hope
be
so.
one of many. So onwards and upwards. And as you think about how you want your career to develop, do you want and you talked about how you like to kind of experiment with different
Mhm,
mediums. How what's when you dream about how your career can develop, is
mhm,
it to continue to do what you're doing, or do you see yourself opening up your own maybe brand one day, or focusing only on these big box retailers, or being, somebody who's iconic in the literary space, or really just doing whatever kind of makes you happy? How do you see it evolve? And the reason I ask is, again, with creativity, there are so many avenues that you can
mhm.
go.
It's
So I love hearing
overwhelming.
how artists make their life into, a living.
Yeah, so like it's funny because that's kind of like the conflict that I'm having right now, where for a very long time, my goal was to write and illustrate my own book. which I alhamdulillah recently completed. My first author illustrator book came out last year, and now I'm just like, what do I do now? Like, so I'm very happy with all the books I've been making. I have some more author books coming along the way as well. So I think what you said of like creating a brand might be my next goal. I have tried to, I've had like an online store in the past, but I love designing work, but I hate the additional work of like the
I
fulfillment,
know.
like shipping and
Yeah.
ordering. And like, I'm very not a math oriented person. I'm just like only creative. So I cannot handle the fulfillment side of things. If I could convince my husband to like leave his job and like do that, then like maybe, but it's just so much work. So right now I'm like content with just like collaborating with other retailers so that they can handle the business side of things and I can just focus on creating. Uh, but maybe one day I would love to do that. I would love to do more teaching because I do have a YouTube channel where I teach people how to uh, develop a career in illustration and the more business side of things, like how to price your work, how to find an agent, and things like that. And I really want to develop a course, like a proper, like a 6 month course or something. Um, so yeah, like I love illustrating books, but I'm trying to find other ways to make this more of a sustainable career. Because I would like to think that I could keep doing this for my entire life, but I mean, you never know, right? So I want to have like as many safety nets as possible. So we'll see. I'm trying to brainstorm.
Yeah, and it seems like, I mean, there's a lot of options. It's as soon as you figure out that you can put a price on your creativity and make it a commodity, like
Mhm.
there's a lot of ways to do it, right? When you decided to start writing your own book, what was that process like? And what are you going to do differently the next time you do it?
Yeah, so I had wanted to write a book for a while, mostly because I was really hated the fact that illustrators are can be quite underappreciated at times, especially in the picture book sphere, where I feel like illustrators do most of the work. I mean, I'm a writer now as well, and even I can say that I feel like the authors don't do as much as the illustrator does in terms of just how much work goes into a picture book, and yet we are routinely left out in like promotions. Like illustrators don't go for like this classroom visits, the school visits, the tours, and I was just so frustrated by it that I was like, you know what, I just need to, I just need to write my own book. And then the other thing was that, and we mentioned it slightly at the top, was that now living in North America, I feel like you don't really see positive representations of Pakistanis, of Muslims, and like I really want to change that. And although I had been doing that with my previously illustrated books, I try to take on projects like Bilal Cooks Dal, Rise Up and Write It, that do feature South Asian characters. I wanted to write my own stories as well. So for my first author book, I wanted it to be something that was really important to me. And that book is That's Not My Name, which is about a little girl who goes to school on her first day and realizes that no one can say her name right. With a name like Anoosha, this is something that I had to deal with all my life. And the book was a huge success. A lot of people resonated with it, and I'm so happy to hear that like it affected a lot of people. But that was a really fulfilling experience. And now for my future projects, I'm finishing up my second author book, and that was a really great time. And the thing that was different about this book is that it's a comedy. So, one thing about the publishing industry that I do have a little bit of an issue with is that I am routinely typecast. Publishers seem to only want to contact me for projects featuring like South Asian characters, Muslim characters, and as much as I love, representing that kind of stuff, it's like, what if I want to draw like lighthearted things? What if like I don't want to have to draw things that deal with like heavy topics like racism and sexism and things like that all the time. I want to be able to do comedy and like lighthearted things as well. But no one was hiring me for it because there is like an issue with like marginalized creators who only seem to get contacted for like their specific identity. And I felt like I was only being contacted because of what I looked like and my identity rather than my voice and what I could bring to it.
Mm.
So yeah, for my second book, it is a comedy. It's very lighthearted because if no one was going to ask me to do it, then I might as well do it myself. And yeah, I'm going to be pitching my third book this summer. And I hope I can do more of this kind of stuff where like just breaking boundaries of what a South Asian Muslim author illustrator can do in this industry and just like try to do different things and just get out of like this little bubble that the industry is trying to put us in.
We have That's Not My Name. My
Oh
daughter Kamila
my
loves it.
gosh.
Yeah, we like I love that book. I think it's so well done and so
Oh,
adorable,
thank you so
and
much.
oh my gosh, I love it. And it's really cute, actually. I enjoyed reading it to her very much because, um, to the point that you made about authors of color being marginalized in their only space, there's an assumption that there's like a baseline, and the baseline is not me and you. And anything that kind of leaves the baseline is an
Mhm.
alternate experience,
Right.
right? And to kind of have the protagonist of the book centered, she's a little Indian girl, right? To have her
Mhm.
kind of centered in the book and be the person who the book is framed around, um, and not have her as a side character. And talking to my daughter about names and just identity, I realized like we didn't have an experience that simple growing up, so it was really cool to read. I really enjoyed it personally.
Oh, I'm so
um
glad to hear that.
yeah, and like I think that it's cool. I'm seeing with amongst our generation a lot of people who are in this position where it's like, okay, you keep like hitting me up because you think I'm like diverse, but like actually I'm just really good at what I do. In fact,
Mhm.
I'm not good as a South Asian woman who's doing this. Like I'm just good, period. So
Oh,
it's
right.
cool to see you. It's cool to see you run with that narrative. What does pitching a book look like for you?
Oh, sorry, you broke off for a second there.
Oh,
Can
that's
you
okay.
repeat that?
I'm sorry about that. My internet has been not fun today.
It's okay.
What did the pitching a book process, or what does it look like? What's it going to look like this summer for you?
Okay, so for pitching a book, for the next few months, I'm going to be working on my pitch itself, and that's going to include the manuscript, fully, thought out, like written out and everything, as well as the book dummy. So if you were just an author, you would only have to submit the manuscript. Because I'm an author illustrator, I would submit a dummy as well. And the dummy is basically a very rough sketched out draft of the book using that manuscript. It's going to be black and white, very simple, and maybe with like like fully illustrated pages. And the reason you only want to have it like very rough is that once you do pitch it to publishers, they are likely going to have changes for you, and you don't want to pitch like a fully completed book only for them to be like, hey, actually, could we change this and this and this, because it's just going to end up being a lot of wasted work. So once I have like my pitch ready, we would make a list of all of the different publishers we would like to submit it to. So thankfully, because I've been doing this for 8 years, I do have like a good list of editors who have either wanted to work with me, with people who I have worked with before, who I really like. Um, and yeah, I'll just like make a list of different people. Because this is my third book, I've already worked I had like a 2 book deal previously with Penguin Random House. I would initially pitch it to them because we have that relationship, and if they like it and they have a really good deal, then I would just stick with them. If I decide that like, oh, maybe I could like get a better offer somewhere else, then I would submit it to other people. And depending on if I get multiple offers, then we could go into auction. And in an auction, all the people who are interested, they'll kind of like bid against each other. And whoever has like the highest bid would win. And I would go with them. And then we get to work. Yeah.
How common is the auction situation?
So I did not have an auction in my last book because I got a preempt, and a preempt is basically so Penguin Random House. They were the first people who I had like 10 publishers on my list, and they were the first ones who got back to me, and they were also my first choice. So they came back and they were like, "We really like your book, and we are going to give you a firm, great offer right now if you decide to go with us and you don't
Don't
even
It's like
look at
early
anyone
acceptance
else."
to college,
Yeah,
early admissions, yeah.
exactly. So I was really conflicted because I was like, oh, what if I get a better offer from somewhere else? Like, I don't want to stay with the first ones, but they were my first choice anyway. So I was like, okay, yeah, I might as well. So that I was lucky to get a preempt there. In an auction, since I mean, this is my first time doing this, I actually don't know how.
You'll
Uh,
you'll find out soon.
I guess I'll find out soon. Um, I think it's I mean, just getting an offer is a great thing, because I do know, unfortunately, like rejection is extremely common in this industry, and it's very normal to like not have any offers come back within your
Right.
first pitch. It's extremely, extremely common. Um, so it is a really great thing if you get an auction, but I don't think I can put a number on like how common it is. Just like if you get it, then that's amazing.
Yeah. What was it faster? Like, because you didn't have the dead time. Well, maybe you had the dead time because of publishers, but you
Mhm.
authoring and illustrating it yourself, was it a faster process than you illustrating for other people?
Um, I wouldn't say fast. So it's like I was given a full year, and that was my first time where I got a full year to work on a book. So in
Yeah.
terms of like timeline, it was a lot longer in terms of like how long I had to work on a book. But in terms of like the project itself, it was so easy. Just because there were barely any notes, and I had already done the dummy was pretty much like the sketches were done because I had submitted the dummy, and there were no notes at all in the dummy. So I only had to go into the final art. Once I submitted the final art, they were like, "Yeah, no notes, easy peasy." Like, not it was the easiest book I've ever worked on. The second author book, however, has been a little bit more tough, and has had a lot of back and forth. But I think it just depends on the project.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. It's cool to see, and like there is a growing class of illustrators. Honestly, more than any, what I've seen, and this is purely qualitative through social media, is actually South Asian women. So my friend Aram Khalili is an illustrator. She does like beautiful, beautiful
Oh,
work.
cool.
Yeah, beautiful work. And so I've seen it happen, and I'm excited for it. In terms of when you started your journey to now, um, is there anything you would have changed along the way, or anything like lessons that you're gonna change in the way that you operate moving forward?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I wish I did differently when I first started. One of the first was that I said previously that I highly recommend getting an agent, but I would also say to not get the first agent you see. So I made the mistake of like right after I graduated, I signed on to a an illustration agency that I submitted to like 50 different places. I got rejected from everyone because my work was just not good at that time. And one place was like, "Yeah, we'll take you." And they were a horrible fit for me. They were not a great agency, and I was with them for 3 years, and I feel like it really set me back in my career.
Huh.
And when I finally left them and I joined my now literary agent, I kind of realized like how, now that I had the comparison, right? Because like at the time when I was with my first agency, I was like, "Oh, I guess this is what all agencies are like."
Right, right, right.
Yeah, once I joined my second agent, I was like, "Oh my god, this is what an agent is supposed to be like. This is how it's supposed to be." And like saw like an immediate difference where like after those 3 years, my career instantly had like a huge jump and everything. So my first advice would be, it's important to have an agent, but if you definitely do your research, if you're able to, like if you get an offer from an agency, you should like contact artists within that agency to be like, "Hey, I have an offer from this agent. What are your honest opinions?" So like you have that inside knowledge, right? And if you I feel like it's so much better to have no agent than a bad agent. So if you get rejected, it's okay. Just work on your portfolio and try again later. The other thing I would do is to slow down, because I had a really bad problem at the start of my career of just not having that work life balance. Had like I was working on 5 books in a year. I was working like way into the night, and I was just not taking care of myself, burnt out very, very quickly. And I'm now at that stage where I say no all the time. I take very few projects, but like it kind of evens out, where like you take fewer projects, but you ask for more money. So like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
but yeah, like that's what I'm really trying to focus on now, on being very selective and just quality over quantity.
Those are awesome lessons, and especially because I mean, my observation of this, you can tell me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
but oh, pardon me for a second. My observation of this specifically my observation of this specifically is that like there's some careers, like if you think about medicine for example, like it's very clear, the path is very clear. On a scale of 1 to 10, the clarity is probably like a 10, right? These are the steps you take. And then when you look at illustration, it's definitely on the lower end of that scale. I don't know if it's like a 2 or a 3. Maybe it's a 2 or a 3, because like the literary agent path is like one path, but then you might want to figure out side hustles. There's another
Mhm.
path that you notice where you become kind of like self-made. um, and it truly is a creative endeavor when you choose to make it a profession, because you have to figure out, again, like how do you reconcile this career with something that you really enjoy doing. And there's some things that I've heard you say along the way that are really interesting, because like they're business lessons that apply everywhere. You mentioned earlier that you just ask for things directly. I'm literally reading a book right now that talks about how like how few people just ask for things directly,
Mhm,
and they think they're asking for things, but they don't say, would you be willing to talk about representing me, for example? It might be
mhm,
like, oh well, here's my work, dot dot dot. So I think that that's really interesting. And there's also a story about rejection that's kind of a storyline that is also really important for anybody in a creative field and outside of a creative field. Rejection is actually like a muscle, right? Like once you
mhm,
get rejected a few times, it becomes way less scary.
mhm,
And
definitely.
you're okay with emailing 50 people to find a publisher. You're okay with reaching out to everybody you know to find an agent. You're okay with reaching out to friends and saying, "Do you know an agent that might want to talk about XYZ?" And
Mhm,
I find that like there are definitely themes in everything that you've discussed that just translate across anything, that are just good. They're good to do no matter
mhm.
what you end up how you end up spending your life. Um, so for folks who want to kind of follow your journey, how where can people find you and keep up with all the cool stuff you're doing?
Oh, for sure. My name is Anoosha Syed. You can find me on my website, anooshasyed.com. If you are more interested in like how to get into the illustration industry, like one big thing to know is that everyone's journey is different, just like you said. And I like people always ask me like how do you get started? There is like no one clear answer because you can get into it in so many different ways. However, on my YouTube channel, just search for Anoosha Syed. I have a lot of videos where I focus on this, on like getting your initial start in illustration, like how to contact art directors, and as well as the more business side of things, which I feel are not taught enough. So, again, like pricing your work, how to find an agent, negotiating contracts is a really big one, like what goes into an illustration contract, all of these different things. Yeah, just on my YouTube channel. I also am on like TikTok, Instagram, all of the social medias, unfortunately, because you kind of have to be these days.
I'll be sure to link all of that in the show notes. And if people want to find your book, where would they find it?
Oh, yeah. So all of my books are in general, you can find them anywhere, on like you can find them on Amazon, you can find them at Barnes and Nobles, but whenever possible, please support your local bookstores and libraries.
Amazing. That's actually a question I had and I didn't ask. And I
Mhm.
forgot to ask it, but I am curious. Do you play any role in getting your books in libraries, or do you rely on your publisher to do that?
Yeah, just my publisher handles it. But like
Yeah,
if
I think about that a lot, because I check a lot of books out from the library for myself and the kids, and I'm like, you'll see a lot of books there, but there's a lot you won't see. And I wonder, like, what does it take to actually get a book in the library? And I think I understand the business model as well, as like you get paid. Oh gosh, I forgot. I read about this a while ago. But there's a business model behind how you would get paid for books in the library too. I'm not sure if you'd be able to speak to it or not, but it's like really fascinating. So I was wondering how library systems work recently.
Oh, I'm not entirely sure about that, but I do know that if you are a Canadian author or illustrator, you can sign up for this program where if you have books within libraries, then you can be paid like a small like commission every time like your book gets taken out. I forget what the system is called, but you can definitely search for it. And like a lot of people don't know about it. I mean, you're only going to get like a few cents per year, but like it's better than nothing, right? Like
Yeah.
you might as well.
There's something similar with audiobooks in the United States.
Oh,
I
cool.
check out a lot of audiobooks from the library. And like there's something similar with like number of downloads. I totally forgot, but I remember being like, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense," because with
Mhm.
audiobooks it's a lot easier to kind of track, I guess.
Yeah, 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 that makes
Well,
sense.
also it's easier to scale. Like I don't
Mhm.
even have to go to the library. I could just download it from my phone.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize how easy it is to check out audiobooks from their local
Oh
library.
my
But
gosh,
anyway.
I love it. I use, like, the Livy app because I'm a
Yes,
huge reader, but,
yes,
like, I stopped reading several years ago just because I didn't have any time. Last year, I picked up audiobooks and, like,
yes.
I listened while I'm working, and I read 30 books last year.
That's amazing. I literally almost finished
Amazing.
half of this. This is when I was telling you about Influence is Your Superpower. I actually would recommend it by Zoe
Oh, yeah,
Chang.
okay, yeah, I'll check it
Very,
out.
very
Thank
good
you.
book. I love, like, behavioral economics. I love, like, social psychology. I just love
Mhm.
books about how people think, and literally, that's my go-to. It's like in 5 hours, I learned this lady's whole life worth of research and, like, the
Amazing.
best tidbits and nuggets at, like, 1.5 speed. It's just amazing while I'm just, doing some work. It's incredible. So, support your local libraries, folks. Definitely support Anoosha. She's amazing.
Thank
Anoosha, thank you so
you.
much. I know Anoosha is one of the folks who I cold DM'd on the internet and was like, whoa, like you are dope. Can you tell people how you did what you did so we can make more of you? So thank you for helping me with that goal. I think I've accomplished it. And thank you so much, Anusha. It was incredible to meet.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This was amazing.